Hi, I'm Damon Frank, and you're listening to the Recovered Life Show. Every week, we bring you a Recovered Life discussion all about how to get unstuck in areas of your sobriety that are keeping you from living your best recovered life. Remember, addiction is a life-threatening condition, and the information in this discussion is provided as a resource only and is not to be used or relied upon for any diagnostic or treatment purposes. This is not a substitute when professional diagnosis or treatment is needed. Now, let's jump into the discussion. I'd like to welcome everybody to the Recovered Life discussion. You're in Unstuck every week. Myself, Damon Frank, guides everybody through an area in their life that they might feel stuck with. If you've ever felt stuck or you're stuck right now in an area of your sobriety, this is going to be a great discussion, guys. So welcome. Just a couple ground rules here. We do record these. So what we do with that is because this will be replayed, we do ask that you just refer to yourself. We'll refer to you in your first name, and you refer to others with their first name. And we also ask that you just be loving and kind and polite. That's it. Really, really, really small ground rules. And we can't wait to have this discussion. So Anne, I'm joined by Anne, my co-mod, who has long-term sobriety. And we always have good conversations, Anne, within the Unstuck room, because I think this is a special discussion because we really kind of get to the nitty-gritty of what people don't really want to talk about sometimes in 12-step groups or therapy. We kind of dive in to right into the heart of issues that have a lot of conflict. How are you doing today, Anne? What's going on with you? Share with us a little bit. The topic I picked today was problem with parents. And look, guys, if you've been sober a minute or you've been sober a decade, you know that people in recovery sometimes have problems with parents. This is no mystery. And I guess the question is, why do people have problems with parents in recovery? Well, I think a lot of it is that, we might come from areas or families that have suffered from addiction. And that is really, really tough. So when we get sober, sometimes there are resentments there are problems there. Maybe we can't go back to the family. Maybe things start to become aware for you about what actually is going on with you, what you're actually feeling now that you're sober. So we're going to dive in. Mother's Day is coming up here. And I know a lot of people in the Recovered Life community have shared that they've got problems with parents, that they have unresolved issues. So we're going to talk about how to get unstuck if that is your issue, or you're married to somebody that's their issue, or you are experiencing discomfort when it comes to parental relationships. So I want to go to Anne real quick. And how are you doing? And do you want to share a little bit? I know you are both you were a daughter and you also, have a daughter. Would you like to share about this just to kind of open up the room a little bit about your thoughts with parenting and problems with parents and the whole idea of once you get sober, looking back on your childhood and also how you parent in recovery.
Well, well, good morning, everyone. Good morning, Damon. Parents, everybody has one or two. Well, we all had one. We all had two to start with, right? But no, it's parenting. The way we were parented has a lot to do with our principles, with our belief systems, and the way we parent has a lot to do with how our children see themselves, value themselves. I know for me, I grew up in a family where there weren't a whole lot of discussions happening. And so, for the most part, I had to kind of discern myself what I thought of the world. And
Mhm.
and children's perceptions are usually kind of skewed. We make molehills out of I mean mountains out of molehills kind of thing. So I had excuse me, I had a lot of learning to do about myself as I grew up. And I am still learning how to be a great parent. My daughter is 24 now, and I've done a lot of things right because of what I learned. And I missed out on a bunch of things. I totally missed because I did not know what to look for. And here's what the decision I've come to is that we're never going to get it right. Because speaking for me, I'm raising a human being who really is her own person, and my job is to not to mess her up too badly, as somebody put it, right? And so it's my primary purpose was to basically see her for who she is and support her in becoming who she's supposed to be. Okay, that sounds really, really good, but I mean, it's hard when we're emotionally involved and that's my daughter and I want to do the best for her and all these things that come up. I'm just throwing this on the table because we're going to have deeper discussions about this, but I will tell you that it's been a learning process. It's still a learning process. Communication is as with any human being, and especially with our children and our parents, because we feel we're so connected. We feel so much, and our emotions sometimes get us even more confused. So there's a lot to discuss here. What a topic you have chosen, Damon. I'm excited to kind of I guess dive into them, different aspects
Mhm.
of it, the communication, the empowerment aspect of it, and how do we get messed up, in some of the ideas that we took from our parents, that whether they actually meant it or not to say some of those things, it's a hornet's nest, isn't it? So anyways, I'm going to
It
hand the
really
mic
is.
to you.
It really is. Thanks for bringing out some of those issues. And I think one of the things that I think we have to discuss when we're talking about recovery and we're talking about parents. I think that, we can put them in different groups, parents in different groups. There are the obvious parents that are alcoholic, right? So coming from an alcoholic home, there are certain patterns that are set up, right? There's certain patterns to set up. And then now, we're talking about ACOA, we're talking about coming from a home maybe that has codependency in there. If you have a one parent that is an alcoholic, the chances are you're going to have another parent that is a codependent, right? So these typically happen. If you have both parents that are alcoholics, there's still probably some sort of codependency there. Now, if you're an alcoholic and you're sober now and you're in this listening to this discussion, you might say, well, my parents weren't codependents and my parents weren't alcoholics, but was there a layer of dysfunction? Was it a dysfunctional family, right? About how they dealt with things. And this is what is happening with ACOA now, where, they've broadened that definition of, dysfunctional families, right? Dysfunctional families. So that's what we're diving into today. If you just joined us here in the Recovered Life discussions, is problems with parents. Do you have problems with parents? Are you someone who got sober and never thought you had a problem with your parent and then realized it's like, wow, you know what? There was a lot of dysfunction there. Are you a parent now and are suffering and are wondering how did you get to a place when all you really wanted to do was to not be that person, right? Like, but yet here you are, right? And this is the great thing about recovery is that we uncover when we start to uncover these stones, we start to lift them up and see what's under them. And the more and more and more we lift them up, the more things that we're able to find. I do want to talk about having a parent as an alcoholic and what I've seen in working with other alcoholics on their journey to get sober about what actually happens to children of alcoholics, right? Now, I will tell you, I had a parent who was an alcoholic, and other people in my family that were alcoholic. And I will tell you that the one thing that I did not want to become in my life, and I was very kind of unclear, I think, as a teen and as a minor, but I pretty much knew this very straight out. The one thing that I did not want to do in my life was to be a drinker and to be an alcoholic. Now, people say, well, that's strange, Damon, because you're you're hosting a room called Unstuck in recovered life, right? How is that possible if that's what you really knew? I was confused about a lot of stuff. Didn't really know what I want to do with my life. I didn't know what kind of educational path that I wanted. I didn't know what kind of relationships I really necessarily wanted. But I did know I did not want to be an alcoholic. But yet here I am with almost 29 years sober. So how did that happen, right? That is the mystery of alcoholism. Now, I will tell you, I think if you come from a parent who had an alcohol problem, an addiction problem, is an alcoholic, there's certain patterns that are instilled at you from a very, very young age, right? And whether or not you're aware of these, those patterns are still running out in your life. And this is the thing about getting unstuck, which is what this discussion always is about. Like for me, it's not enough to identify it's like, oh, I have this issue. I don't want to live. I don't want to be hang around the crime scene all day long. If I've identified that there's a murder and the detectives are there doing a chalk scene and the crowd has formed, I don't want to be there 5 days later, right? After everybody's left. But that's what happens with alcoholics. We get stuck because we don't understand how in the hell did we get here? Because if you have alcoholism in your family, you've seen what it does. And it's funny, I remember very clear saying, "Hey, you know what? I don't want to be that. I don't want to be that." But if I had to add up how many people that I know that are in recovery who said that they did not want to be alcoholics, and they did not want to be problem drinkers when they had parents that were problem drinkers, I could fill a stadium with those people, right? So why is that? So I want to dive into that a little bit. The second camp that we could talk about is patterns. Now, you might be in recovery, you might have a year, a two, you might have a decade, you might have several decades. But you're starting to realize either how you raise your kids or how you are with other people, those alcoholic patterns, right? You might have a problem. You might not have been parented the way that you wanted to be parented. And now as a parent, you're realizing like, oh man, like this wasn't this is I wasn't parented correctly, right? A lot of people have that and they want to repair that, right? But that is tough sometimes because what happens is you get in if you're sober, if you already have kids and you are now like trying to repair certain things you've done, or you have certain thought patterns or beliefs or things that you think about yourself or other people, and they are somehow subconsciously instilled in our children, right? So that's another area. Problems with parenting or problems with, repeating those patterns over and over and over again. And then the last thing I want to bring up, Anne, before we start bringing people up, because Recovered Life Discussions is really about what you have to say, right? But I want to throw a couple topics out. The third is, the third topic is not getting what you needed with parents, right? And with Mother's Day coming up, I didn't have this situation with my mother, so it's not an issue for me, but I know other people have shared that they have issues regarding a mother parent with realizing in sobriety that they did not get what they needed. They did not get what they needed. How do you repair that in recovery, right? So I want to dive into that a little bit too, because I think that's an important thing. I'm just going to share here before I turn it over to you, Ann, and we start bringing some people up. I found that, for me, having an alcoholic parent who is a father that I did not have the relationship that I needed, right? And so, I'm a father now, so I had the opportunity to be able to recreate that, right? In a positive, healthy kind of way. But not only in that, working through 12-step programs and mentoring and things like that, I was able to become the person that I did not have through nieces and nephews and nieces, right? Like all that kind of stuff, right? So there's always an opportunity to be that role in recovery. If you didn't have the opportunity to be parented correctly, you can parent correctly now. This is what I call healing, right? And I'm saying this not in a codependent way. Like I'm not, you don't want to seek out people in some weird codependent relationship, but in a healthy way, be the person. I got sober in my mid 20s, and I will tell you, I will absolutely tell you that I needed intervention there from a father type figure. I didn't really have that, right? To a certain degree, I did. I had other family members who ended up filling that role, but I was missing that leadership as a man. But through recovery, what's happened is I've been able to be that person to other people, right? And this is the great thing. I found that sticking into the problem, it's like, oh man, and I was this person for the first couple of years of recovery of like, oh man, I didn't get what I needed here. It's never going to be fixed. That circle down the drain thing, you just keep circling the drain over and over. And what I found is taking positive action. Okay, you know what? I'm never gonna. I didn't have that. That's true. I didn't. Right. So just to be able to acknowledge it and to be truthful about it, but to say like, but where can that play out in my life? Right. And this is the beautiful thing about recovery. So, Anne, I hope I set the room up. We're still only, 17, 18 minutes in here. I'd love your thoughts before we start bringing people in. So I kind of went over three kind of camps of things that I've seen that people have problems with their parents, the parent issues kind of play out. I'd love to invite some people. We've got a lot of people here that have great sobriety in the room. So I would love to bring you guys up. So definitely, I'll send out some invites. Definitely raise your hand. I'm going to turn it over to you, Ann, to see what you think about kind of what I said. And, how does that relate in your life?
Wow, you said so much, Damon, and I could relate to so much that you did share. It's, well, I could talk about it for a while, but I want to kind of add my perspective, kind of answer the questions that you brought up. As you were asking, becoming an alcoholic, right? It's nobody intentionally says that's what I want to do. For me, and I'm blessed to have been experiencing sobriety for over 32 years now. And I will tell you that it was never intentional, and nobody thinks about it. I didn't even know it was a thing. So for me, it was escaping from pain. Now, how did I decide that's what I'm going to do? Well, the home I grew up in, there was always drinking and parties. There were always people coming and going. And my dad, was very much a social drinker. That's, uh, over the top. And so to me, alcohol, it was there when you feel good. And then, if we would have a tummy ache, my mom would give us a shot of vodka. It would warm up the tummy, and you feel better. So come on, if you're celebrating, you drink. If you're in pain, you drink. And so a few things happen. Like all of us, we experience things and things we see in families. Now, you did bring up something, dysfunctional families. We all have dysfunctional families to whatever degree it may be, and our perception makes it dysfunctional. I have two sisters. We grew up in the same family, raised by the same two parents, and all three of us are very different. My sisters don't have an issue with it. One of them has a lot of emotional challenges, and the other one is very stable and balanced and happy. So, how did this happen? Well, it's all perception. Depending on what's going on in our parents' lives, we take on identities. I'm the oldest. I had to exceed, I had to excel, I had to do everything. And on the things that I couldn't, somehow I took it, you know, oh, I'm not enough. because nobody knew how to sit across me and say, Annie, you're wonderful. Who you are is important. To me, it was like, oh, I'm only acknowledged when I accomplish things. And so the spiral began. So the bottom line is that sometimes our parents don't know how to talk with us and say, this is what I see. You're amazing. You're powerful. They don't know. They're dysfunctional. They have their own problems, especially if they're alcoholics themselves. They have no clue. Nobody escapes into alcohol or drugs because they're feeling good about themselves. They're escaping from pain. So they don't know how to be. So, how would you know how to be happy, healthy, and stable, right? So, that's the first thing, escaping from pain. Well, the patterns, oh my God, I'm not even going to go into the patterns because we see it over and over again. We adopt patterns that are around us. And if we don't have somebody to go um, to say, here's what I'm thinking, and they guide us as children, we just get stuck with those patterns. And when we grow up, we follow those patterns. A lot of times we don't even know what they are, right? And so, um, not getting what we needed, my gosh, we don't get what we need most of the time if we're in a dysfunctional home. So how in the world are we supposed to be living happily? And it takes a different way of looking at life. It takes something for ourselves to decide, this is what I want. And how do I go about getting it? Well, if you don't know how to process things, how are you going to figure out to go get it? And for me, when I learned how to do it is when I came into the program, when somebody first handed me the promises. Well, you'll be able to think this way, you'll be able to act that way, you'll be able to feel that way. It felt like a fairy tale to me. But then when it was pointed out that, you can have all those when if you do those, the 12 steps were pointed out, then I was like, oh my God, now I have a how-to guide on how I'm supposed to behave, how I'm supposed to think, how I'm supposed to take care of myself. And he has worked for me beautifully. And now, so going to parenting. Well, something happened with me and my daughter that really set everything for me, where it just kind of put it all together. I missed some things that happened to her. She was a teenager, and I was like, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry." And she just used that as a way to, like, keep me hitting me over the head. The more I apologized, the more it seemed like she wanted to use that. And at some point, I was like, "Honey, stop. You know, did you always know you are loved?" She said, "Yes." I said, "Did you always, your entire life, know you are loved?" She said, "Yes." I said, "Well, then I did my job." And so when I said that, all of a sudden, looking at my parents, no matter what it was, I did always know I was loved. Somehow, they never said, "I love you," but somehow they got the message across. So once I started seeing that, all of a sudden, I saw everything from a whole different perspective. My parents were not perfect by any means. That's why I wanted to escape. And I will never be perfect, but I'm giving myself a break as a parent. And I understand that my daughter is going to be who she is. And, the things that she has learned from me, the good, and that will serve her, and the things that I did maybe that caused her some pain, or situations where I did not do it the way I'm supposed to, she learned how to do it, and she's going to be a better parent than me, hopefully, when she has her children. So anyways, that's where I am. And the question, if anybody who's listening, um, if you're mad at your parents, just ask yourself, did I always know I was loved, one way or another? And then continue to be mad. I promise you it will subside. And the same thing with the children. So with that, I'm going to hand the mic back over to you, Dave. Uh,
Great. Thank you so much, Ann. That was really great. Guys, just to reset the room here before I go to Daniel, you're in the Unstuck room. We're talking problems with parents. We're talking about recovery, sobriety, how to get unstuck with certain issues. We kind of peel back the onion on certain issues here in the Unstuck room. And the topic is problems with parents. Daniel, Welcome to Recovered Life Discussions. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Super interesting topic. Uh, Let me see. How can I start this? I come from an interesting perspective, right? Me and my wife were both children of addicts, both on the father side of it. But we both had completely different upbringings, right? Mine parents were immigrants, so we were like taught to be self-sufficient almost from like toddlers, like cooking, cleaning, being self-reliant because my parents were immigrants, so they always had to work. They weren't around to do the leave it to beaver stuff. So like I grew up like that, right? And I had this conversation with my dad while we were both drinking, of course. And I'm like, it's your fault. Like it's your fault I'm like this. Because I was brought up this way. And my dad just looked at me straight in the face and said, if this is the attitude you want to have, we're gonna make it. And that dude shattered the paradigm I was living in and was like, well, this is the hand I was dealt, and I have to figure it out, right? And now, from my wife's perspective, she was her parents weren't like that, and they had the more work. We have the external perfect picture, but in the house is chaos, and like their family doesn't function right if they're not always in communication and like they're their own support system, right? So when it comes to me and her as parents, it's the two extremes. Like I'm super self-aware and try to instill that into our daughter and our new child that we're going to have in 9 months. And she's super socially aware. So, but we live in the extremes. We don't live in a comfortable middle. So we're trying to find a silver lining for that. But I mean, we learn as we go. My 13-year-old is like on the outward fine, like straight A and B student. She looks all right, but I could still see the inner resentments from when we were drinking, kind of lashing out, and now she's a prepubescent teen, which also adds extra levels of stuff. So I'm just happy that I have the self awareness to see it and to share that with my wife, because if it's not completely perfect in her eyes, like she feels like a failure and then lashes out in a messed up way. So I don't know. It's a balance of our two extremes to try to make a semi functioning human being, right? So I don't know. That's where I am. But yeah, my father shattered my pity party when he told me that these are the cards you were dealt with. How are you going to figure it out now? Because we can't reset life. That's what it was. And I yeah.
So great, Daniel. Thank you so much for sharing. You brought up so many great things there. A couple I want to talk on about, and something that Ann said too. Now, I'm going to be honest. From my experience working with the 12-step group, it didn't heal the situation with the alcoholic family member. In some ways, it left it incomplete. What it did do, I will tell you, is it allowed me to identify what was going on. And it brought me to a place of neutrality, somewhat, where I could actually look at the situation without being emotionally charged or confused. Now, that's a blessing in itself. I had to do other work around that. For me, I think acceptance is huge. And Daniel, you said a bunch of things about about your daughter that I think is just so beautiful. The fact that you're just aware of it and you're talking about it and you and your wife are focused on trying to make things better always, that in itself I think is huge. I think if you're a child of an alcoholic or you are an alcoholic yourself, a lot of times you just want that person, that loved one, to be able to make an attempt, right? And what happens, you realize in life, is as you get sober, if you have family and friends that are alcoholics, not everybody makes that decision. So, acceptance is a huge part of it. And I really relate to the whole idea of perfection. I think, having regrets when you're in recovery and this idea that I have to get everything perfect all the time is, I have dealt with that. What I've learned, just I think with a little bit of aging, just a lot life experience, staying sober, is many times there is no perfect. There's just the best decision at the time that you could make, right? And being able to just make those decisions and just be honest to say, like, hey, I made the best decision with what I had at the time. If the facts of the ground change and I can make another decision, I'll do that. But I have to just be able to move on, knowing that I did the best I could with what I had. And any comments before we go to Meredith? Okay, I'm gonna go. I've lost Ann there. Meredith, welcome to Recovered Life Discussions. We're talking about problems with parents. Love to hear what you have to say.
Hello, Damon. Hey, everybody. This is a great topic. I've spent a lot of time in my recovery on this topic. I'm an adult child of an alcoholic, and grew up in dysfunctional home. My father was an alcoholic, and my mother never labeled herself as an alcoholic, but I know that she used drugs and alcohol to cope. I think that her biggest issue was of codependency, and um, I I did not go down the alcoholic route, although I really wanted to. I didn't have anything to numb my pain. Um, it just seemed like I was in pain all the time, and I tried to like alcohol, and I just didn't. My body rejected it and said, "Nope, this isn't for you." Um, but what I did do, I let my patterns of growing up in a dysfunctional home be my picker. They were my patterns made my choices for me. It picked my career, it picked my friends, it picked where I lived, it picked who I pleased, it picked my relationships, who I married. And after doing some recovery work, I've done a lot of recovery work in this area. And um, on my path and on my journey, just growing up and just being so angry and mad and resentful and bitter from the childhood that I did not get. I spent, you talked about returning to the crime scene. Well, I think I lived in the crime scene because I didn't know how to get out of it. I didn't know anything else. And it wasn't until I found the recovery rooms that I got some reprieve from that. But I had to go backwards. So I did have to go back to the crime scene. But then I learned what the crime scene was. And then I learned tools and I learned ways to be able to reparent myself. Um, I did not get what I needed from my parents growing up, neither one. Um, and it's like I spent a lot of my adult years resenting that because I wasn't given life skills. I think Daniel touched on, being very self reliant and self sufficient because your parents were absent and never there. That was me. I was, cleaning house and doing my own laundry at age 8. I felt grown at age 10. So it was all about producing and being self sufficient and being self reliant. Um, and, in some areas of life, that served me very well. It served me very well in my career, but it also turned me into a perfectionist and a workaholic. So it's living in that extreme. There's nothing wrong with being self sufficient and self reliant, but if it starts creating problems within your life, you're too hard on yourself, never feeling good enough, you're beating yourself up, that's when it really becomes a problem. Um, and that was me. And can remember myself saying, it doesn't matter what I do or how I do it, it's never good enough. And I used to say that all the time before recovery. And I've learned through reparenting of myself by going back and then being able to take a blameless inventory, is what they call it in adult children of alcoholics, We take a blameless inventory, and it is an inventory of ourselves and our choices, an inventory of our parents. So we don't sugarcoat what happened to us in our homes or in our dysfunction. So we're honest about that, but at the same time, we don't point the finger. And then we learn to be able to see what our part and our role is in the way we live life today, and the things that we can do. We can recognize our patterns. We can work a recovery program. We can talk to a recovery coach. We can have a support group and a support system. And there's many things I know now that we can do differently. We do not have to stay stuck in our patterns. We don't have to let our patterns pick our decisions in life. Um, and I know Anne asked the question, did I always know I was loved growing up from my parents? And the answer was no, I didn't. Um, their words and actions did not align most of the time. And I never really felt from my mother. I did feel love sometimes, but it was very conditional. It was based on what I produced and what I could do. Um, so feeling that way and growing up, not always feeling loved, it was very confusing. But as an adult, and now as a healing, recovering adult, um, I can say that my love has to come from within. So I had to go back and reparent myself and I had to identify my inner children. I had to heal them, and I had to love and accept them for who they are. And that has been a huge turning point in my recovery, because there's parts of myself that I really just didn't like. But on this journey, it's been very difficult, but at the same time, it's been extremely worth being able to go back and identify those things. I'm not a parent, like I don't have any human children. I have fur kids. Um, but for me, I am a child of God. So I am his child. And he gives me the tools that I need to parent myself. And that's where I keep my focus on. And I know today I am enough. I always have been, and I always will be. So thank you so much, Damon, for this topic. I'm going to land it there, and I'll turn the mic back over to you.
Thank you so much, Meredith. You always have great insight on all the topics that we choose to discuss. So many great things there. So many great things. This idea of reparenting, I'd like to dive into that a little bit too. Meredith, if you could comment here real quick on this, how did you? Because obviously at one point you had the discovery, hey, I'm going to have to reparent myself. What did that look like? What were the steps that you took to start reparenting yourself?
That's a great question. The first thing, I didn't know I was an adult. So, like on the outside, I'm an adult. Um, So in my mind, I'm an adult, but on the inside, I'm mush. So I'm this scared little abandoned child. And the first thing that I had to do was acknowledge that there was a problem. There was a void that was there. I had to acknowledge that void. And once I was able to acknowledge that there was a void, then I had to ask for help. And it was through a fractured relationship, is what got me there, because I knew something was wrong. Um, the other thing that I noticed was throughout my entire life, I am the one and only constant in my own life. And if I look at the broken relationships or disappointments and things, I was there for every one of those things. So I'm the common denominator in my own life. And when I started to be able to look at, okay, I am the one that is here, and that's when I could really be able to look at the fact that it's not that everything was my fault, but there was things, and I played a role in my own life. And there came a time when I had to stop blaming myself and blaming my upbringing. And yeah, I think Daniel mentioned that pity party, that a lot of us come to. We were victimized as children. It's okay to say that we were victims as children, but I lived my life being a victim. So how did I come to realize all of that? Honestly, and if I could sum it up in one word, it was pain. It was that void. And I knew that something wasn't right. And I did not know what to do. It was through that fractured relationship with an addict that broke me and took me to my bottom of my codependent bottom. And that is when I went to my first meeting. And from that point on, I found a support group. I found information. I found a good therapist. I found ACA. um, it's like one thing lead me to a next, and then something else leads you to another. As far as reparenting goes, I got into a ACA step study with Christina Dennis, who is amazing. She is she's just a dear, dear friend to me now and a mentor. And she's really cracked open that other piece, because ACA work is very deep rooted. And there was a time when I just didn't know. And there's a lot of people that walk around in this world that really just do not know how shattered they are on the inside. They feel it, but they don't know why. They don't know what it is. So, awareness and being able to be, brutally honest from within, is, for me, it was my first step. After that, and once I could admit that and shine some light on that, addiction hates exposure. So when you shine light on that shame and you shine the light on the inside, um, it becomes a little more bearable, and it allows you to be able to see things from a different lens. So I hope that was helpful. I hope that answered your question.
It did. Thank you so much. Thank you. I think it's important to not only discuss the topic, right, about how we get stuck and to identify where we're stuck, but I think it's also important to give practical solutions about how people actually can get out of being stuck. You know, one of the things that I did is I had gone to the self help thing after I had been sober for a period of years. It was like a coaching thing. And, in there, I kind of further identified what was going on with me, right? I'd already kind of identified it through a 12-step program. I'd worked on trying to heal it. There was some healing there. But I think one of the things is that discussed, Meredith, is this idea of acceptance. I truly had to accept the fact that it didn't go the way that I wanted it to go, and that it didn't go the way that I would have done it now, and that it wasn't perfect, and that it might not be the way that I think it should go, and that I had to let go of expectations that I had, because what I found is that the expectations and resentment was tethering me to more dysfunction. It was allowing me not to be able to grow and achieve things in my life that I wanted to do. And I remember the day that I had that really paradigm shift where I said, you know what? It's time to not close the book on this, but it's time to move on from this. It's time to actually identify the fact, to accept the fact that, you know what? I can't change other people. They're going to make a decision about what they want to do. That decision doesn't define who I am, and I can make my own decisions about me. This was a great time, and I hope everybody has that, that's listening here, because it was great. It was really, really great. It was freeing. And I remember walking out of this situation and saying, you know what? I am free. And the ability for me to communicate differently to those people changed drastically as well. I could be honest with the fact that I didn't feel like I got what I needed. And I could also be accepting in the fact and forgiving in the fact to understand that, you know what? It's okay. I've identified this. People are going to do what they're going to do, and I'm going to do what I'm going to do, and I'm going to still move forward and make new decisions in my life. So, guys, welcome to the Unstuck Room. And if you want to jump in at any time here and comment, we'd love to have you do so. If you can unmic, I think you might be stuck there.
No,
Oh,
I'm
there
here.
you are. Okay.
I'm here. Yeah. Oh God, good stuff. And uh, we all have moments when we see a shift, and with me, like I was sharing earlier, when I asked, as I was telling my daughter, "Were you always loved?" And that moment when I realized, yeah, my parents were so imperfect and they had no communication skills whatsoever. We never heard the word "I love you," but I found it in their actions. And Meredith was, she was sharing how, her uh, I guess reception of love, and it got me thinking about. the way we see love, we all it means something different, different gestures, different things. And so when I started looking into reparenting, that, or you call, I didn't know I was looking at it as reparenting at the time, but that whole journey of, okay, what don't I know, what would I need to learn? And as I'm looking at, what do parents really teach us? How to function, how to think, how to solve situations in our lives when things come up. How do we act? And my reparenting started when I actually learned how to identify when I'm, like you said, powerless over people. They're not. People are going to do what they're going to do, and everybody is looking to take care of themselves the best they can. And it doesn't mean I'm always right. I'm, relying on God to actually guide my thoughts and actions, and and putting things in His hands that I have no clue how to handle, but also taking a look at who I am and how am I showing up when different situations come up. Am I showing up in a healthy way? Am I showing up in a not healthy way? And the program actually gave me those guidelines. But one of the things that I did, in my own process of reparenting, I did talk with people, but I used to go on a lot of retreats. Every 3 months, I would go on a different retreat, and they were all on different topics. Some of them spirituality, some, it was just self help. And during those weekends, when I would just do a deep dive, whatever topic that was, for me, doing it that way eliminated all the distractions outside of it, and I would focus on whatever I was walking through, because I can I can decide to turn around whenever I'm facing something that's painful or difficult or whatever. I can decide, oh, I don't want to look at it now. So I figured if I'm in a 3 day weekend on a particular topic that's giving me challenges, and I'm surrounded by people who are walking through it together, we can talk it out, we can support. And that concentrated effort, concentrated intention and attention got me through those breakthroughs. So that's how I've been reparenting myself, and giving my parents a break. Like, they did the best that they could. I know they did, and their best sometimes didn't work very well. And so that's kind of how I've been doing it. It's a process, and there's always something that comes up, and I'm like, okay, what am I going to do about it? And for me, I have found there's never a situation in my life that comes up that one of the steps doesn't have the answer to. And if I don't know how to fully work it, then I go to somebody. So do I need to pray? Do I need to take a look at myself? Do I need to go apologize to somebody? What do I need to do to get past this? And always asking for help, being humble enough to ask for help. And that's what works for me. That's how I keep growing. And I guess that's my reparenting system. And I found it again. Knowing how to work the steps is what's given me the guidelines, on.
Love that. I love that. You mentioned something, and I had a conversation about this on the Recovered Life show, one of the last episodes, Anne, where you said something that's said a lot in 12 step groups. It's like, maybe they were doing the best that they could, right? And I agree with that. I think, looking back in my life, I said, oh man, why did I make that decision? But really, at the time, I was doing the best I could with the information that I had. I think where it becomes difficult with alcoholic parents, right? If you have a parent that is an alcoholic, what becomes difficult about this is that you realize somewhere, and I did in 12 step groups of saying this over and over and over again. I felt I was a little brainwashed in this. The reality and the truth of the situation is sometimes they're not doing the best they can with what they have. Sometimes they know that it's not the right thing. And sometimes the truth is, you know what? They didn't want to do it. They could have stepped up, but they didn't step up. And this was a breakthrough for me because I think it's a cop out a lot of times. I agree with the fact that people are doing the best they can with what they have. That's true, but not always, right? Some people are very aware of what they're doing. And if it's a family member, I think that this is even tougher, right? And sometimes, and what, it was interesting. I remember when I had the shift, and I remember telling a guy that I was working with in a 12-step program, I said, you know what? To be honest with you, this doesn't ring true for me. And I remember him saying, listen, um, sometimes it's not true. Sometimes people aren't doing the best with what they have. Many times they are. Many times they are. And it's funny. I think one of the things that we have to do if we're in recovery, whether we're in recovery through codependency, alcohol, drugs, gambling, anything, I think what we have to do is we have to have more patience with people. And we have to look back and say, you know what? Um, I've made bad decisions. I know I made bad decisions when I was actively drinking, right? I made bad decisions. So I understand what it's like when people make bad decisions. But at the same time, I don't think we want to brush everything under the rug and say, well, they're just doing the best they could with what they had. Sometimes that's not true. Sometimes people know what they're doing. Sometimes people don't care. That was my big epiphany is sometimes that they know what they're doing is not good and they just don't care. And that I have to be okay with that, right? I have to be like, I have to have acceptance to that. I don't have to be okay with it, but I have to have acceptance.
I really,
Guys, you were,
Damon, I just
oh,
sorry, I
go
just
ahead,
wanted
Ed.
to pop in here real quick. I really do agree with that. Um, there's been people in my life where I can look at them and if they've wronged me or something, I can look at them like my mother, for instance. I really do believe in my heart that she did the best she could with the tools that she had at the time. But I can look at my dad and I can say, I can't give him that same credit. I can look at relationships and say, this was a conscious choice, this was intentional, and um, I know you didn't do the best you could. And like you said, it's okay. It's just a matter of accepting it. And part of that, for me, part of that accepting that, because that really sticks in, or it used to stick in my craw really bad. But part of those things that parents, I believe parents are supposed to teach you is how to identify your emotions and be able to give you some form of tools or understanding of how to manage those emotions. And if you grew up in a dysfunctional home, most people that grow up in that type of home, they don't know what their emotions are, or if they are lucky enough to be able to know what they are, they don't know how to manage them. And for me, a lot of being able to get to acceptance is being able to manage my emotions about how I feel about what they've done. And so there's a lot of times I can't get to acceptance without being able to identify the emotions that I'm feeling at the same time. So that was a really good point that you brought up. So thank you so much for bringing that up.
Meredith, I'm so glad that you brought that up too, because, not only that, a lot of the times when the person starts to become aware, the recovered person starts to become aware of what's actually going on, that they're not doing the best they can with what they have, that they're making poor choices, right? And that now that they're aware, they're going to continue to make poor choices. Um, there is a bit of resentment that comes in. I know, I think that's only human, right? That this resentment comes up to say, it's like, man, why are they not getting it? Why are they not getting it? And I think that sometimes we don't know why. Like sometimes people die of alcoholism. Other times people will have recovery forever. We do know clues. Like I'm a big believer in success leaves clues. If you keep working on yourself, I think you have a better chance, right? We know this, we see this. And part of this is just the recovered life discussions that we're having, guys. I mean, I think having these discussions is a key to an opening to a greater awareness of ourselves and what Meredith said, the emotions that we're having, being able to identify those and take right action around them. Um, any comments, Daniel? Would you like to chime in here?
Yeah, it's super interesting that this is brought up, right? Like I grew up in a neighborhood, a lot of gang violence, right? So a lot of families of generations of gangbangers. So I had a lot of friends when I was a kid, and he was just like, I'm never gonna get out. I'm either gonna be dead or doing life in prison by the time I hit 21. And I try to help him not see that, but that's what he believed, and he, mission accomplished because he's doing life in prison now. But it's not just the addiction; it's the dysfunction in the household and what we think is normal with our environments, right? So, like the neighborhood around you that you live in, and if all of these families are in dysfunction, it's normal until you leave your neighborhood and see that it's not just like that. Because just like the internet, right? If you feel that you were hurt or jaded and you go on the internet and you do your Google searches, you're going to find a lot of people that are like you. And then you have your weird hive mentalities that jump into conspiracy theories of whatever. And yeah, it's but you can't control that. Like me trying to pull him out of that type of lifestyle was just going to make me crazy because he had already accepted what his life was going to turn out because of his beliefs. And I had to learn to just like, it's either I help him climb his ranks in the life he wanted, just like if I had a friend that wanted to be a CEO but started out as the the mail guy distributing letters. Like you're gonna have to learn to figure out how to climb your ranks and be the top of your hierarchy of whatever you decide. But most of this depends on it's also it's nurture and then environment and then what you believe is normal needs to be tested so you can adjust with information, right? I'm done.
So love that. And I do believe that recovery, Daniel, is a lot about testing what you believe, right? Most of it is letting go of old ideas about our perception, about who we think we are, who we think other people are, what we can do, what we can't do, what our beliefs are, how we frame them. It's it's the process. So thank you so much for bringing that up, Daniel. Amber, how are you? Good to see you. We're talking about parenting. We're talking about problems with parents and recovery.
Hey guys, good morning. I'm waking up still. Yeah, so one thing that I've done or I've had, or something that I've kind of worked with that's helped me kind of release kind of resentment or anger towards some of my the things my parents have done is I've kind of been able to, um, I kind of look at my parents and then I think about like their parents and then their grandparents and like what they were brought up in. And like there's some things that um my dad is the alcoholic and there's a lot of things that he should have known better and could have done better. But I know his household and his upbringing was a lot worse than mine, and he was taught that that's how you treat people or what is okay, or even people acting out in their own hurt ways kind of still, they're not growing up from their problems when they were a kid and having alcoholic parents. Um, and so I've kind of been able on some level to kind of let go of some of the anger or the resentment or judgment because, I know that he's just a hurt little kid still inside him. And I can still have like the tools to like do what I need to do to keep myself, moving forward and working through things. But I don't know, it's helped me a lot just because generational stuff is really real. And a lot of times our families or people, that's how they're sick because people, usually their parents or somebody else that was taking care of them was also sick. So it's helped me a lot, have a lot of peace with that and kind of accept him where they're at and accept the situation um, and then be able to have that information and then be able to move forward with not with trying to just be aware and sensitive to not repeat those patterns.
Yeah, Amber, that was a beautiful top to put on this dysfunctional cake, if you will, right? Yeah, and that's the one thing that's helped me a lot too. Being able to see my parents as a person as opposed to just my parents, the whole person. What have they gone through? What have their experience and what have they learned from their parents? And it just, yeah, that was just a beautiful share. Thank you for that. Damon, are you here?
Thank you so much, Amber. That was great. Yeah, sorry, I had a little problem with the button there. That was so great, Amber. Yeah, and I think looking back through, when you look back and you say, "Wow, look where those people came from," right? Like, and where they're at now, if they made some sort of improvement. I do think, stomping out alcoholism and addiction is a generational fight. I think, just to end this here, this room, because this has been such a great discussion. Uh, I think this is a generational thing. I think, the awareness of it and the open communication starts to stomp out this repeating itself. I know one of the things that I was told almost 3 decades ago was somebody said, you will never understand the power of just staying sober a day at a time. If you really don't accomplish anything, Damon, they said, in your life, if you're just able to stay sober, you are going to see things around you. You're going to see that the change that you've been able to make. And I've been able to see that. You know, um, it's interesting. Like in my family, I have nieces and nephews. They have never seen me drink because I have not drank since they've been alive, right? It's been amazing to see that, people seeking out help within the family structure and friends just by saying it's like, hey, you know what? Wow, this guy's been sober, right? So never underestimate just the power of you staying sober. And I always say the kids are looking, right? The kids are looking. And I know, like, first I want to say, just because I'm have recovered life and do coaching and I'm up here, I am the least perfect than anyone. I'm going to tell you that. I really am. I struggle with a lot of things, just like everybody else. I'm human, just like everybody else, right? And but one of the things is that I understand that if I could just kind of chip away a little bit at a time, generationally, it's going to have a big thing because the next generation or the generation past that or my kids' generation, they're going to say it's like, wow, if they ever end up in this issue, wow, hey, we know somebody that stayed sober the whole time. When I first got into recovery, guys, I'm going to tell you, I didn't even know that sober was a thing. I didn't even think it existed. That's how far I came from. I didn't know anyone who was sober. I'd never heard of such a thing. And why would anybody want to do that anyway? Right. So for me to go in 3 decades to where I'm at now is a huge evolution. It might not seem like a lot, but it's massive. And the impact of the people around me, it's massive for them, even if I'm not aware of it. And I think that's the whole thing. So, guys, I'd love any final thoughts that anybody might have before we close out the discussion. I am so grateful that everybody has joined us here today to discuss this stuff. Painful topics. Not, it's not as fun to discuss parenting issues or these deep issues in recovery, but really that's where the healing begins, right? So if anybody would like to unmic and have any final thoughts at all, would love to hear it. If not, we could just close down the discussion.
Now, I have Damon, just to add quickly to that, what you said, time. We don't realize how far we come until some time passes and we look back. And I love the way you described there are people in your family who never saw you drink, and they know if somebody has a problem, they can come to you And I've experienced the same thing too. So I just want to say, you guys, just watch and see what happens. Just keep coming back. And I'm done.
I want to add, Damon, that that was a really good point, and it only takes one person within the family to shift that generational cycle of dysfunction. Only takes one.
Yeah, I'd like to add that. Well, my final thought is, like, the perceptions that we have is only based off of the limited amount of people we have, right? The internet is cool if you use it the right way, but if you just surround yourself with the same like-minded people, you'll never grow, and you'll just think that this is the norm. So we really have to question our beliefs, but be grounded in self so we don't get lost in it, right? I was talking to this young lady who was trying to prove the cheating was the ultimate good. And I'm like, only if you see things as a selfish child would, because you're only looking at silver linings thinking that that is the norm because you were brought up in a chaotic environment, and the people that surround yourself with live by that same perspective. So we need to challenge our beliefs to be able to actually grow as better humans. I'm done with that.
So beautiful. Thank you so much, Daniel, for that. Meredith, Amber, and this has been an amazing Recovered Life discussion. I do want to add, guys, if you're not part of the Recovered Life community, please click the link above or go to info.recoveredlife.us. You'll see a little blinking, little animated GIF there that you can join. You just click on that. It takes less than a minute to join. And it's 100% free. And we have these conversations continue there. It's a community of like minded people who want to live their best recovered life. Also, there's a link to be able to get a hold of me. If you feel that you are stuck in an area of your sobriety, I do give away a couple of calls a week to people who just want to talk about how to get unstuck. All you have to do is go to info.recoveredlife.us, find my little picture, Damon Frank, there, click on it, and you can make an appointment. And how do they get a hold of you? I know people can follow you on Instagram, and also you are also on Recovered Life, so they can connect with you there.
Yes, yes, they can. Just feel free to DM me, and yeah, that's kind of where it is. We just kind of hang out in this club and share.
Thank you guys so much for all of your time today. I hope everybody has a great weekend, great Mother's Day, and I'm looking forward to seeing everybody next week on Unstuck.
Keep the conversation going. Join Recovered Life, a community of like-minded people who are looking to live their best recovered lives. Membership is free, and you can apply at recoveredlife.us.